Welcome to the Mwango Capital Podcast. At Mwango Capital, we aggregate key information on African capital markets through Twitter, Telegram, and our weekly newsletter called The Baobab. We also hold weekly discussions every Friday on topical issues on African capital markets, and we also engage in analysis and research and training. We look forward to another engaging conversation on our Twitter spaces. So join us there every Friday so that we can keep having quality conversations on African capital markets. Without further ado, welcome to today's conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our Twitter space. My name is Eric Mokaya. I'm the founder of Mwango Capital. We try to have really quality conversations every Friday and every week about marketing. The last month or so, one of the things that we've been paying very close attention to is the IPO for MTN Uganda. We have our two speakers here today. I'll let them introduce themselves and then we'll dive right into the IPO. The structure of the conversation today will be very simple. We'll start with a few questions to the speakers, which will be mostly directed by me and my co-host, Eric, who's going to join a little later. And then after that, we will invite members of the public to ask questions. We may not let everyone come to speak, just to have a bit of control over the conversation. So the best would be look at our pinned tweet, and then below it, you can post your questions. The main aim of today is just to understand MTN Uganda, what the company is, what its structure is, the business model, the financials. Just dive right into it, and then to understand how we can also participate in this as East Africans. Without much further ado, I'm going to invite our speakers to introduce themselves. We start with Paul. Tell us a bit about yourself, what you do day to day, and then I'll go to the next speaker.
Thank you, Eric. Good evening to everybody online. It is a pleasure to engage you on a Friday evening. We do not take it for granted that you have agreed to spend some time with us on a Friday. It's much appreciated. Name is Paul Muganwa. I work with Stanbic Bank Uganda /SBG Securities. I head up the investment banking unit here. And so my day-to-day work is helping our clients find solutions in the capital markets, in the private equity space, and also with long-term debt and project finance. I am here in the capacity of both a transaction advisor and receiving. We've supported MTN through this process, and we are very encouraged to see a lot of interest and a lot of appetite coming out of Kenya. Eric, back to you.
Thank you so much. We'll also get to understand the role of such players like you in an IPO. It's very nice that you joined us today. So straight to you, team, because you're the man of the moment. Maybe you can tell us a bit about yourself and what you do. And for those who don't know you, what your journey has been to MTN.
Thank you. Good evening to everybody online. It's a great honor, as Paul says, that you've taken the time to join us on a Friday evening. My name is originally from Belgium, but I've been on the continent and in telecoms for more than 23 years now. Since 1998, I was formerly CEO of MTN in Ivory Coast, and I also worked in telco in Senegal, Gabon, Chad, and DRC and Zimbabwe. So I've been around, but for the last 5 years now, CEO of MTN Uganda. And it's my first IPO. It's a very exciting journey. It looks very easy on paper until you get started and becomes a real full-time job. Currently, I'm calling in from upcountry in Uganda because I'm finishing upcountry roadshow myself together with 10 of my colleagues. We have gone around for the last 2 weeks, the whole of Uganda. I was in the eastern region. I crossed the Kenya border a few times or very close. So I was in the eastern part of Uganda for the last 11 days on roadshows, going from town to town, explaining what the IPO, the MTN IPO is all about. So it has been an exciting journey in terms of engaging with potential investors. And of course, they also remain always your customers. Yeah, it was very exciting. And we still have another 2.5 weeks to go until we close the offer. And on Monday and Tuesday, together with Andrew Bugembe, my CFO, we will also be in Nairobi for further engagements with East African, Kenyan investors in particular. Over to you.
Looking forward to seeing you in Nairobi. A few of the people I know are waiting to hear from you directly. I know like an IPO process is such a taxing process. So I'll start with Paul, who can kindly explain to us what an IPO is normally and what the process they go through with their clients in terms of how do you go from a company being not listed to being listed, and how's the journey been for MTN Uganda? Paul.
Thank you. I'll start with the acronym and what it means. IPO, initial public offering. Simply means that a company is taking its shares, and usually it's in the form of ordinary shares, from private ownership onto an exchange, either the Uganda Securities Exchange or the Nairobi Securities Exchange, whichever exchange is being nominated, and is offering these shares to the public to participate. There's quite robust criteria that the company needs to attain to qualify to list. I won't dive into that detail, but I can just broadly speak about what critical considerations they are. One is corporate governance. The second is financial performance. And third, the stability of the business, the sector that the business is participating in. This criteria has been created and is enshrined in law, the body that looks after and ensures that this criteria is met and sustained is the Capital Markets Authority. In this particular case, it is the CMA of Uganda, but there's very close collaboration between the capital markets authorities in East Africa. And so you find that the standards are very similar. The CMA is there to ensure that investors are protected. And that's why an IPO is an interesting path to pursue for a company, because it's access to capital, but more importantly, it's a format that allows for investors to participate with a significant amount of transparency and with embedded protections for minorities. The IPO is the first step in a company commencing its existence on the Securities Exchange. It usually is for a defined period of time. For this particular offer, the IPO opened on the 11th of October, and it is going to be open until the 22nd of November. After that, the shares will be listed and people can buy and sell as they wish on the exchange. And maybe a bit of color on the offer terms. MTN is floating up to 20%. That represents 4.5 billion shares. And those shares are available for Ugandans, for East Africans, and for foreign investors. However, there is an allocation policy that we can talk about later that dictates how those shares are allocated. So, Eric, I think that's a brief summary. We can engage in the rest as we continue.
All right, I'll invite Eric Maina, my co-host, to ask a question to the CEO.
Thank you, Eric. And thanks to the panelists as well. A question to the CEO. For someone who's hearing about the MTN Uganda IPO for the first time, or about the company itself for the first time, would you give us a brief sketch of the history of MTN Uganda and highlighting key milestones of the company over time and why it's taking up an IPO at this particular moment?
Thanks, Eric. Pleasure. Let me start with a little bit of history. MTN Uganda was incorporated in 1998. So that's exactly 23 years ago, October 1998. And in 98, we started with a S&O license, the second national operator license, which means that there were already existing players. There was UTL was already there, Uganda Telecom, and then there was a company called Celtel, which I think Kenya audience must be familiar with, because later on it became Zain and then Airtel. We actually were the third entrant in the market, and we won a international bidding process for the award of the SNO, the second national operator license. So there was international competitive bidding, and MTN won that bid and entered the market in 1998. We managed to achieve our 3-year business plan within the first 9 months. Probably the business plan wasn't ambitious enough, or we really very much underestimated the potential of the market. But what I'm saying is that from the very beginning, MTN quickly overtook its 2 competitors and became, within 6 months, the market leader. And we haven't given up that position ever since. Currently, we have 15.7 million subscribers. 1 out of 3 is also a active data subscriber, and about 2 out of 3, 9.5 million, are also mobile money subscribers. Over the last 23 years, we've grown. We're still number one. We have about 55% market share. It's pretty much a two-horse race in the Uganda market. There is Airtel 45 and MTN roughly 55. So it is quite competitive. It's a competitive market. I think it's a bit different from across the border, where one player is much bigger than the second player, but it also comes with its own challenges, that kind of market positioning. We've all been the first in innovation, 3G, 4G. We also did some trials on 5G early in 2020. And we also launched mobile money as the first in Uganda in 2009, 2010. Quickly after, of course, in Kenya, M-Pesa was launched. We were one of the first to copy and paste with pride. And sometimes you don't need to reinvent the wheel, just need to adjust it and adapt it and also implement it. So yeah, that's MTN Uganda in a nutshell. Maybe just for the sake of comparison, to put context, we like comparing ourselves, with our big Safaricom neighbor across. But of course, we are not playing exactly in the same kind of dimension. Roughly speaking, rule of thumb, you can roughly say that the Safaricom is about 5 to 6 times the size of MTN Uganda. When it comes to revenue, profit margins, kind of basic high-level financial KPIs, is roughly 5 to 6 times the size of MTN Uganda. But of course, we are close. There's a lot of overflow. There's a lot of best practice, a lot of subcontractors and products and services that are being launched in Kenya within weeks or months. We are also launching them, or sometimes vice versa. I think it's a privilege, it's an asset for us to be so close across the border and see what is happening there, especially when it comes to the M-Pesa story. And as I say, sometimes you don't need to reinvent everything. We work with the NCBA, which is the same bank as Safaricom works with. We have other partnerships, I think the audience must be quite familiar with M-Kopa for device financing. There's a lot of advantages of being just across the border and having a solid company somehow as a reference point that guides you somehow, where we are going. Of course, we have our own strategy. The market is different. The regulators are different. But as an industry, I think a lot of things are happening in the same way in Uganda as they would already be happening or would be happening in Kenya. The markets are similar, not at all the same, but they are similar. So it is an advantage to be on this side of the border, and we get some good learnings from what is happening on the other side. In a nutshell, that is the quick story of MTN Uganda.
At this point, I also would welcome our speakers. I think Dyer and Blair are around also. Thank you so much for joining us, and also from Stanbic. These are the lead stockbrokers for this. They also get a chance later to introduce and talk about this. I think we'll start digging a little bit deeper into the company, and you can tell us a bit more about the business model. How do you make money as MTN Uganda? And then how do you position yourself so that you can be able to beat the competition? And if you can share a few strategies that have helped you, of course, stay ahead of the game and go to the top of the market share and still remain there these many years later.
Sure. Our key strategic, ambition is always to remain the number one when it comes to the NPS, the Net Promoter Score. Within the MTN group, we are very passionate about that. And the way you deliver on number one in terms of the NPS is first to build the best network. Network is key. Investment in coverage, in data capacity, speeds. You cannot compromise on investing in the network. We remain a technology company. The network, the quality, the size, the coverage, the capacity, that is your foundation of success. We always try to remain the number one when it comes to network experience. For us, there's no compromise on that. And of course, that requires investment, continuous investment. We have CapEx, 15 8% roughly of revenue every year that we are reinvesting. We believe that the foundation of future growth is to continue investing in network. And secondly, the NPS is also driven by value. What value do customers get? It's not necessarily just about the price. What we try to do is not to enter into destructive price wars, because ultimately in the long term, if you're in a two-player market and you go into a price war, all operators or both operators in the long term lose money by going below cost or going to extremely crazy kind of value propositions that erode value. We try to remain a value player, not necessarily always the cheapest, but we try to give back the best value for money. So we do loyalty points. It's similar to these, I think what is called Bonga points in Safaricom. We also have a similar program. We give back to most loyal customers. We have segmented bundles. So the top line bundle might be 5% more expensive than our competitor, but below the line in terms of segmentation, we can attack certain segments, certain customers with very attractive bundles that are only visible to them and are not visible to the open market. So we try to, remain rational in our competitive fight. And I must say, our friends on the other side, they have also become much more rational because they have 45% market share. They also have a bottom line now. I think their behavior in some other markets was a bit more disruptive, was a bit more race to the bottom, and we attack on price. Their behavior in the Uganda market is much more rational because I think they have a very healthy market share. They have a bottom line now that is also positive. They're also under pressure not to do anything crazy that would erode the shareholder value for everybody in the market, by just lowering price to ridiculous levels. And then quality goes down and your revenue line and your bottom line even more goes down. So that is on the voice and data. I think that the key message here is NPS through network investment and through fair, good, best value for money that we give to customers. Then on the mobile money side, we are 60-40 roughly. So on the telco side, we are about 55-45 market share. But on the mobile money side, we are a bit higher, 60-40. So what we are doing on the mobile money side is really moving away from the traditional cash in, transfer, cash out, the basics of mobile money, which is really money transfer. So we are moving away from that, building an ecosystem to promote payments like the Lipa na M-Pesa. We have a similar product. It's called Momo Pay. It's not yet at the same stage or at the same maturity as on your side, but we know where we're heading and we're building that ecosystem, onboarding all those merchants so that you can use your mobile money line to do payments everywhere, and every shop in every town and every village. That is very big on our agenda. One of the top key strategic initiatives is to build the mobile money payment merchant ecosystem. And then little by little, we're also getting more and more into banking services, loans, saving products, insurance products. So always in partnership with the banks, because we also don't have a license that allows us to do all of those banking services directly on our own. But with the partnership of those banks, we do now compete, I would say, at a reasonable level with some of the banks on basic products of overdraft. Like you have that product, what is called the Foliza. We're just launching a similar kind of product with a Momo overdraft, we call it. So a small overdraft that you give to customers to be able to finish a payment. On the mobile money side, it's really about payments and bank tech, fintech services that we are developing.
Thank you. I wanted to ask Paul now to give us a little picture of Uganda and how the market there looks like generally, especially those people who are from outside Uganda. Maybe a bird's eye overview of Uganda for someone who doesn't know.
Thanks, Eric. I will not dare to speak about the telecom sector. I think Wim is better placed, but I can take it one step higher and just talk about the country. So Uganda is a very interesting place. One, we've weathered COVID relatively well. The official statistics from Bank of Uganda indicated that we actually grew last year by 3.3%. which was decent growth considering the circumstances we were in. We had 2 very hard lockdowns in aggregate for about 5 to 6 months, and that really affected economic activity. But the country has demonstrated a degree of robustness that was surprising. And when you dig a bit deeper to understand what are these drivers of robustness, I mean, the first critical one is a relatively well-diversified economy, right? And I'm talking quite broadly when I highlight diversity, the mix of services, manufacturing, and agriculture. Now, agriculture is the largest employer in Uganda. It employs over 70% of the population. And this is also reflected in our demographics. Urbanization rates are the lowest in Uganda of all the East African countries. So a significant dependency on agriculture for employment. And agriculture has actually done quite well over the last 24 to 18 months. And so that provided a bit of a buffer. Number 2, manufacturing has traditionally been a very small sector in Uganda, but it's increasing. Last year, I believe it grew about 15%. And that's because of import substitution. That's also because of a development in the sophistication of the local corporates that are involved in this manufacturing. There's also quite a bit of foreign direct investment in specific sectors like building materials. We've seen quite a bit of Chinese money come into the country. So those developments in manufacturing really provided a buffer. Lastly, services, and the biggest contributors there are the telecoms and banks. They are one of the largest employers in the country and the largest contributors to the fiscal purse in the form of tax. And those 2 large contributors also weathered the storm pretty well. As a country, I think we've done relatively well. Over and above GDP growth, there's been a decent amount of stability. Our currency has actually appreciated year to date between 1.5 and 2.5%. And it's sustainable appreciation. It's a change in the characteristics of our capital and current account, a lot of FDI coming into the country as a result of oil and gas. So that currency stability has helped with inflation. It's also helped with interest rates. So very stable, benign environment. But I don't want to overstate the strength of the economy. Like any economy, COVID has been challenging and there are many small businesses that are struggling. So economy is robust, economy is done relatively well, but there's still inherent weaknesses and still quite a lot of work to do. The other major thing that I think is worth highlighting, I touched on slightly, is the demographics. We will dive into this when he gives some context on growth, but we have amazing demographics. Young population growing, the transition into adulthood is amazing. I think it's like 1 million people every year. And this presents a very good foundation for consumer businesses. Yeah, and then there's always the interesting topic of our politics. We do have some interesting spikes in activity around the political season. But if you're looking over a long horizon, 20, 30 years, the country has been relatively stable. And that provides a very good basis for investment and sustained growth. Back to you, Eric.
All right. I wanted to maybe follow up on that. And then after you, I'll ask the 2 new speakers to tell us a bit about themselves. Maybe you can tell us what exactly is your role, Paul, in this IPO process? And then how has the experience been? And how does this maybe compare to past experiences with IPOs in this area?
That's an interesting question, Eric. Taking a company to the public markets is a very engaging process. And there's a multitude of advisors. We have played the role of transaction advisor, and that's really supporting MTN kind of navigate the nuances of the process, engaging the regulators, preparing the company to go public in terms of the information requirements, the governance requirements, and building a strategy together to ensure that this is a success. But over and above that, there are many other advisors that add a significant amount of value. One is the legal advisors, SNL, which is a local legal company, the brokers who play an important sales, marketing, and strategic role. They are essentially the interface with the investing community, and they are both Dan, Blair, and SBG Securities will give you some more context. I see both of them are online, and they have very important inputs into strategically how we approach the offer. The experiences so far, working with MTN is a pleasure for a couple of reasons. One, MTN is a large company, and there's a lot of well-seasoned and well-established processes, procedures, standards, and most importantly, individuals that have an appreciation for this type of process and that add a lot of value and make a transaction advisor's work a little easier. Secondly, it's a relatively bold company when it comes to innovation. This IPO is, I think we can argue, truly the first electronic or digital IPO where most application processes can be completed online. It was a bold step by MTN to do this in the middle of COVID and to do this for the first time in the region. So fantastic company from an innovation perspective. And we continue to enjoy working with them. They're flexible, they're quick on their feet, and they're very open. And I think the market will begin to experience all these strengths as they participate on MTN lists. Back to you, Eric.
All right. I think it's good also to hear from the other two players in this, especially those who are heavily engaged in marketing the IPO in Kenya. So I want to welcome Greg from SBG Securities, and then also there's someone from Dyer and Blair. So Greg, you can start by telling us who you are and what you do and what your role is in the MTN Uganda IPO process.
Thanks, Eric. Good evening. It's an absolute pleasure to participate in this discussion. Thanks again for your accommodations. For introduction, my name is Gregory Waweru. I'm the head of SBG Securities in Kenya. And we are together and alongside Dyer and Blair, the authorized selling agents from a cross-border standpoint. My role, and particularly in this IPO, is essentially to assist MTN and our sister company, which is SBG Securities Uganda, in designing and implementing a marketing strategy on the distribution of the MTN IPO into the Kenyan investor base. One thing I think is critical to mention is that this is actually a precedent-setting moment because we have actually managed to seek approval and obtain approval from the Capital Markets Authority in Kenya to actually market a cross-border offering within a structured framework that we are going to facilitate seamlessly for investors in Kenya to be able to participate meaningfully in a cross-border offering. That's my role in a nutshell for this IPO. For me personally, for those who haven't met me, I've been head of SBG Securities, been with SBG and the broader Stanbic Bank Group for a couple of years now, 9 years in the making. And essentially, this is something I'm very passionate about, bringing remarkable transactions, particularly to market, expanding the investable universe and assets where investors in Kenya can participate. I hope that's a good enough introduction, Eric. Back to you.
I think later we'll also give details on how people can actually buy the shares for the IPO, and maybe you can prepare on that. Dyer and Blair are also in the house, so tell us a bit about your role in the process and a little bit of history on Dyer and Blair and maybe involvement in IPOs. I didn't ask SPG, but maybe later we'll ask them the same.
From Dyer and Blair, it's great to have everyone on this, speak more and also evaluate this MTN IPO. I do agree with the speakers that have spoken before, William, Greg, and also Paul, that this is actually IPO. For the first time, we have this cross-border offering, whereby the Kenyan investors have been given an opportunity to participate in the IPO. Dyer and Blair and IPOs, we are well known for having guided several companies just to come to market. William has spoken about Safaricom and also now the similarity of the product offering that MTN IPO is giving to investors and also who they are doing currently in the market. And Dyer and Blair guided Safaricom in IPO, and we have been tapped by MTN to offer or to distribute, market the products to Kenyan investors and also to Ugandan investors through our, and there to guide and give operational guidance to investors. I do agree with Paul that this being the first IPO that's been done online. It's a very seamless process, very easy process, a very exciting process for investors. 5-10 minutes, you have opened your cross-border account and you can invest in the shares. It's quite a great offering for us. We do look forward to guiding. I think we'll come later to speak more about the operational processes and also how investors can participate in the IPO.
All right. We'll come back to you.
All right. Thanks a lot for that. I'll go back to Wim now with a question on the current IPO. Just to give us an understanding, what is the current ownership structure of MTN and what led to the sale of the 20% stake that you're currently IPOing for? And in addition to this, is the intention to list the rest of the 80% remaining stake of MTN?
Okay, thanks for the question. Let me take it step by step. Today, MTN Uganda is owned by MTN International, for about 96%, and 4% is held by Mr. Mbire, a Ugandan national. So 96 and 4. So it is MTN International that is selling 20% of its shares to the general public, and then will reduce from 96 to 76, while Mr. Mbire will remain with 4%, and then the general public will have 20%. Okay. The total value of the transaction, the 20%, is 895 billion shilling. Those are Uganda shillings, which is about $250 million. So the evaluation, the value of the company is about $1,250 million. That's the evaluation of the company. And that would make it by far the largest on the USC, because the total value of the companies on the USC today stands at about $1 billion. We would immediately become like more than half of the value of the USC. Okay, something worth mentioning is that we are listing for two reasons. The first reason is because it is a license obligation. When we renewed our license about 1.5 years ago, we renewed our license for a period of 12 years. There were three main conditions for license renewal. There was payment of the license fee upfront. For 12 years, $100 million, we did. The second license obligation is to provide national coverage. Now, as such, that is not a problem. It's not really an issue in terms of profitability, because as Uganda is such a densely populated country, we're still seeing a lot of growth opportunity, even in rural coverage. So that obligation isn't really a burden to carry. It is more of an opportunity. And then the third license obligation was the obligation to list. Now, the spirit of that listing obligation was also to localize the company, to have more local Ugandan shareholders. That was really the underlying spirit. It is like localization to listing. That was the spirit of that third obligation. And that's where we are now. We are fulfilling that. But at the same time, we look at this really as an opportunity, because a company like MTN Uganda, the biggest taxpayer in Uganda by far for the last 10 years, and also the most profitable company for the last 10 years. So such a company only having two shareholders, one 96% from South Africa and one local businessman 4%, that is not sustainable. That is not healthy. That's not right. So we looked at this and said this listing actually is a real opportunity for us to widen our shareholder base. We are aiming at least 50, who knows, maybe 100,000 new Ugandan retail investors that would really strengthen the company. We do believe that a company with a wide shareholder base is much stronger, and especially if it's a localized shareholder base, is much stronger, much more resistant than a company, yes, a big company, but only with two shareholders. We looked at this listing obligation and we really turned it into an opportunity to widen that base and to create shared value. At the MTN Group, we have that strategic intent. We call it shared value. We have already listed in Ghana. MTN Ghana is listed. MTN Nigeria, Rwanda was also done. And now we're in Uganda. So even without being at the license obligation, we were going to do it anyway, sooner or later, because it's part of the strategic intent of the MTN Group to really create shared value through local listings in the different countries that we operate in. I don't want to scare anybody. This is not just about Ugandans. Of course, we are giving some bonus shares if you use your phone to open up your SCD account, if you use your phone via mobile money to pay for your shares. As an MTN Uganda customer, you're getting 10% bonus shares. But we also thought that it would be, in the spirit of the East African Union and really evolving into one marketplace. We also thought that it would be good to give incentives to East African citizens. So every East African is getting 5% bonus shares. Ugandans are getting the same 5%, plus if they use MTN mobile money line, then they get the additional 5, which makes it 10. But the 5 for all individuals also applies for Ugandans, but also for all East African citizens, because we really felt that widening the subscriber base and localizing shouldn't just be limited to Uganda only. We are in East Africa, we're getting more and more integrated. So we felt that this was a good move to make it also a bit more attractive for East Africans to participate in this.
Okay, quick follow-up question, especially about the bonus shares. A common question that we've also gotten, like, where are the bonus shares coming from? Are they like an issuance from within the company, or what's the strategy around them? And are they only the case of an oversubscription?
Paul, do you want to take that question?
Yeah, thanks, Will. The bonus shares are part of the issued capital, and they are subject to the allocation policy, right? So in the event of an oversubscription, the policy allows for pro rata allocation that also accommodates the bonus shares. There will not be any issuance of new capital to accommodate the bonus shares. The 4.5 billion shares that are in offer include the bonus shares.
Perfectly answered. Now we are halfway through this session. I would encourage, if you have questions, you can always go to our pinned tweet just below it, post your questions. You can send our questions so directly to us on DMs. Our DMs are open also. We're also doing a thread on most of the points that the speakers are speaking about. So you can follow a thread if you miss any point. A recording of this event will be available within next week, so that you can also maybe follow up on any points and any question that you've missed. We also found out that there's some companies at the Uganda Stock Exchange which are cross-listed in Kenya. Has it crossed your mind at some point maybe to do a cross-listing in Kenya?
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting, good question. For the time being, no, it is not yet on our roadmap. We are starting with this 20% on the USC. Let's see how it goes. I don't want to exclude it, that it will never happen, but it is not on the plan for the time being.
All right. So I wanted to ask also maybe Dan, Blair, and SBG Securities. They can tell us what's the period of offer of these securities? When are they open and when does it close? How do we apply for the shares as maybe people based in Kenya? And I should say, a friend of mine opened an account with SBG today, and it was very fast. I think it must be SBG in Uganda. I'm not so sure, but they said Kenyans can learn a lot about the onboarding process. You can also tell us how you onboard new clients and how they can open accounts for both of you. We'll start with Dan, Blair, and then SBG.
Thank you, Heli. The application process for the IPO is quite simple. It's a very straightforward application. One, everything is being done online. So the USC, the Uganda Securities Exchange, has created an online portal for account opening. So mostly for the Kenyan investors, I know the early investors, especially Dyer investors who had Stanbic Uganda shares, so they already had existing SCG accounts. But there are new crop of investors who didn't have or have never participated in this market investment. All we need to do is visit USC portal. So SDA is the portal, or USC is the portal. Once you get into the portal, you create an account. The process is for you to create an account. Then they send you a verification link. So you just enter your email address on your username and your password. Then they set you a verification link. Once you receive the verification link, it takes you back to the portal itself. You can log in now using the credentials that you have created and go to the portal and start the account application process. So for the account application process, you need 3 key things. So for Dyer, I've made it very easy for clients, and even that's what will be captured on the platform itself. You need a passport photo or a very good selfie. You need a photo of the front and the back of your national ID or the passport. Those are the 3 key things that you need even before you log. Take very clear photos. I think at this point it's good to note that individuals, for companies, now the normal company requirement, your company registration certificate, your CR12 positions, for those ones have to be certified. But for the individual, you just need to upload a document. You can fill in your bio details on the platform, then also capture the bank details. I have the bank details. I think it's good to Paul has said about in case of a subscription. Bank details that you capture there, one, extra fund, or that one not, if you have not been allotted, that's where the funds will be sent back to. That's one. 2, I think at this point it's also good to mention and we will speak about the dividend paying policy. have quite a very good dividend pay policy. So that means that with the commitment of what has been happening, looking at the financials in the last few years, so that means that once we return a dividend, so for those investors looking for a diversification or even a dividend stock, then the MTN Uganda IPO is to go for Uganda on this platform. They have done quite a lot of work to capture details of all banks in Kenya. So the Kenyan investor, if you are banking KCB, SBA, WIM have also said that most of these banks are called regional banks, your INM, or your Absa Bank. Most of these banks and their branches are captured on the platform. All that you need is to scroll down and capture your bank and your branch. So making it the process very simple for you. Yes, then after you capture all your details, to be now to the part of choosing a broker, your account will be custodied. For Dyer and Blair, we have a subsidiary Dyer. So for all our clients, the Ugandan STD accounts are custodied or will be held through our Dyer and Blair Uganda subsidiary. Dyer and Blair Uganda, you choose the choice of brokers. So they are listed there. And after that, now just submit the application. Send it to USC. They do the verification and the account is set up. And then use the process. Within an hour, you have received an email with your SCD number. And after you receive an email with your SCD number, now you can go ahead to do the application. So once you receive your SCD number, and login back to your Easy Portal, contact this on your top left. There is a bar on IPOs, current IPOs, choose MTN IPO. From MTN IPO, and it's a two-step process. The first process is out of field, even you had captured all your details. Second one is on shares, so click on shares, or next click on shares, and you choose the number. You fill in the number of shares you want to apply for. As then, as said, have given a bonus incentive for all investors who invest. That for every 100 shares that you get allocated, then you get 5 bonus shares. So it's a very good incentive. Minimum application are 500 shares on the prospectus, and also in batches of 500. So we have 500 shares, 1,000 shares, 1,500 shares. Just fill the number of shares you want to apply for. For you, payment of the amount you are supposed to pay 10,000 shares. So that means that's 200,000 Uganda shillings. Then you just, from there at that point now, just confirming the terms and conditions and click on application. And after you apply, what you get a form, which you can download the PDF, which shows the application number and shows the details of the application. And after that, now you make payment. For the Dyer and Blair, for the clients coming through Dyer and Blair, we have created the payment process also to be. We have, and you can get contact with that. And with this, we have sharing with our social media platforms, and also we share with you the bank details. Have a Ugandan account whereby you can create instead the funds to UGX that have within a bank, having a bank account that we can share with you that you make that. And after that, we do give you a confirmation statement about the receipt of your fund for the IPO. So that's the general application process for IPO application. And that's online for 10 minutes. And even when it comes to in case you have any queries, in case you need more guidance, at any point there's an issue in the application process, you can always get in touch with us, either through our social media platforms or even through our email, the one I have shared that just for us to be on the process. In a nutshell, that's how the application process is. Yeah, so welcome. And I think at this point, I can't speak much or can't speak more of the company. Wim and Paul has told us more about the company, about Uganda, about the opportunities they are in. When you come to think about it in terms of product and portfolio diversification, for a very long period, we have just had one telco. And so as an investor, if you are looking to diversify your portfolio holding, and I think for us as Dyer and Blair, and that's what we have been guiding our clients to diversify different products across various different sectors. And so this MTN IPO gives you as an investor an opportunity to just build on your portfolio diversification theme. Across, you are getting the opportunity to grow the telco sector itself, across the geography itself, and not just
but you are also getting the opportunity of the growing space that is Uganda. And as you have seen, and as the speakers have said, this is a growing market. A lot of innovation is happening in that market. Kenya, the market here, some multiples ahead of the MTN. But if you look at the growth and that's happening in the sector in the country itself, then it becomes a very good place to, just diversify investment in them, just to hold extra, to hold shares in that sector and also in that country. So for us, basically, that's what we've been, and we are guiding our clients into. So get in touch with us. We'll guide you in the process. In case you have any questions also about we have, and in case of anything that you want us to guide you on, and we will always be there in touch. And thank you, Eric.
Thanks a lot for that. Just a few follow-up questions from what you've mentioned, and some of these questions are from people listening in. One is, will the dividends be issued in Ugandan shillings, and how will the conversion to Kenya shillings work? And what is the withholding tax for dividends that will be issued by MTN to Kenyan? Another question that you can tackle while tackling those ones: what rate will you use to refund money to subscribers in case of an oversubscription?
For the dividend payment, basically like the way bringing the investors back to Safaricom here, we have a very good number of foreign investors. Dividends are paid in or declared in Kenya shilling. And after that, if a client or if an investor be paid to, let's say, dollars, then there is the conversion rate. So what happens here is, one, the rate negotiated, having a good conversion rate from the Kenya shilling to the investor currency. And what we hope to do, and this is something that we develop and in the process, based on the volatile, the market, or negotiate good rates for our clients. And we have always been doing this with clients. We negotiate with the bank. We have various arrays of banks that we do work with. So we do negotiate good conversion rates from one collector to the other one. So for this one, that will assist clients on as the process continues. We'll have more details on this. But generally, the dividends will be paid in Uganda shilling. Clients will receive their funds back here in Kenya shilling. And given the nature of the payments, we will just ensure that clients are not getting favorable. And this is the conversion that clients will do.
All right. Greg, you can speak a little bit about the process at your institution, ISBG, on how you help out clients and maybe answer a couple of the other questions if you have comments on them. Something that has also come in, which you can also speak about, is what's the withholding tax on the dividends like for maybe people from outside the country. Greg?
Thank you. I think the process is broadly the same, given it is a process that has been set out by the Uganda Stock Exchange, whereby you essentially have to go to the portal to set up your SED account electronically. And once that is successful, you can subsequently go back in and apply for the MTN shares, IPO shares from the portal. I think that's fundamentally the process that we are broadly following in terms of a application of shares. Subsequently, and I think what is critical for us is that for existing clients of SBG Securities in Kenya, we have a truncated process where once they do that, we will assist and facilitate the cross-border payment process where clients can essentially deposit and fund their CDS accounts in Kenya, actually in the CDS brokerage accounts in Kenya in the usual way, and then we will facilitate the cross-border payments into the main IPO account in Uganda. However, clients are also free to essentially, or non-clients of SBG Securities who essentially want us to assist them in the process can also free to send money across to the IPO account in Uganda. So that is, in a nutshell, the process. It is not really dissimilar to what was described earlier, but I think, of course, there are nuances around how because we obviously set up differently, how we assist clients and even non-clients who I guess are also potential clients to participate in the IPO in a manner. That's the process in a nutshell. You did ask about the withholding tax. I believe for non-Ugandans, it is 15%. I think I stand corrected. Paul can probably confirm that later on, but I think to my knowledge, it is a 15% for outside Uganda for other investors. I think that's the process and the response to your question. Back to you, Eric.
All right, now we'll go back to Wim, and then Wim, maybe you can now speak a little bit about the capital allocation thinking at MTN Uganda. How do you distribute? What's your intention around dividend payment and maybe investment capex intensity and all these kind of things? I mean, how you think about capital allocation and distribution to investors. You can also give us a historical perspective on how you've been paying dividends. Maybe also speak a little bit about the people who are coming in. Should they expect some dividends? I know, like from reading your prospectus, you pay 3 times a year. You've already paid twice at the interim. So maybe the final dividend, you can speak a bit about it also. So a loaded question, but just unpack for us the capital allocation thinking around MTN.
Sure. Thanks for that. It's a very important matter for investors, of course, to understand. So as you rightfully say, we have a dividend payout policy of 3 times a year. There's a first interim dividend around August for the first 6 months performance of the year. Then around October for the third quarter of the year. And then in March, when we close the books, fully audited result, then we pay out a final dividend. So as you rightfully have said, we have already paid out the first and the second interim dividend. So we will consider, of course, a final dividend in March, and the new shareholders joining will benefit from that final dividend. So far, we have paid a 10 shilling dividend per share. That is, we have paid so far for the first and second interim dividend. So we'll see. The plan for sure is that there will be a final dividend. How big? Of course, I cannot speculate on that at this stage, but the plan definitely is that there will be a final dividend in March. I mean, you can do the maths yourself. Roughly, if the first 3 quarters have given us 10 shilling dividends, then the last quarter could give us a rule of 3. You'll calculate for yourself roughly what that could mean, depending, of course, on the actual performance of the company. But that is just to give you a flavor. In the past, so over the past 4-5 years, our dividend has been growing systematically about 20% year after year. In 2018, for example, we paid out 5.3 shilling dividend per share. Now we have almost like doubled already for the first and second interim. We're almost at double what we paid in 2018 for the full year. So we are on a very healthy growth path when it comes to paying out dividends, at least 20% growth year after year for the last few years. And we have been paying consistently over the last 17 or 16 years dividends. So as early as 2004 or 5, we started paying dividends, and we have never stopped doing so. It shows the profitability and the health of the company. Of course, telecom requires investment. I would be lying to you if that would not be the case. Telecom requires building network, capacity, coverage. So we do allocate some important portion of our profits back into investment. On average, we have about 15% of revenue that we reinvest in terms of capex, mainly for the network, of course. And that is the foundation of your future growth. The day you stop investing in a telco industry, in a telco business, is the day you stop growing. Okay. Of course, coverage, there is a certain limit to the coverage. Once you've covered everything and everybody, okay, that's it. But then you still need to invest in more 4G, start doing 5G, more fiber. So the investment story definitely continues, although the guidance is that in the latter years, we will probably go down from 15, maybe, 14, 13, but we will definitely stay around that kind of figure between 12 and 15% of revenue. And then the dividend policy is very clear. We pay out at least a minimum of 60% of the profit. That is the minimum. Of course, subject to certain external factors that could change those dynamics, but the overall guidance in the policy is at least a 60% dividend payout, which in the past, we have always been close to that 60%. In 2020, it was a bit less, because we only reached about 48 or 49%, but that was out of caution. 2020 was a difficult year. We just paid our license fee $100 million. There was Corona, there was lockdown. While we continued investing, we were a bit cautious in terms of paying out dividend last year. And this year, I think we're already at about 70%. So we also did a little bit of a catch up in 2021 because we held back a bit in 2020. I hope that gives a good idea of our capital allocation strategy.
Yes, that's really good. I'll come back to you. You can maybe prepare on telling us a little bit about your product roadmap going forward, what you want to do, the long-term vision for you at MTN Uganda. That's after I talked to Paul about the markets in Uganda. How deep are they and how is the liquidity there? So like if I want to buy and sell the shares, once the IPO is done, how does that look like?
Thanks, Eric. A very good question and one for potential investors to appreciate. So I will speak about the Uganda capital markets relative to the Kenya capital markets. First of all, in terms of participants, active SCD accounts are between 25 and 35,000 historically. And when we compare this to Kenya, that I believe is in excess of 1.5 million to 2 million, you can appreciate the distinction. So a relatively nascent and smaller capital markets than Kenya. In terms of trading activity, historically, decent amount of trading activity, especially around meaningful corporate events for listed companies, major exits by existing shareholders, major corporate announcements, drives some activity. But with the advent of COVID, there's really been a significant slowdown and the market has become relatively liquid. Having said that, like most things in life, it does take a bit of a trigger and a meaningful event to change the tide. And I think the one thing that Kenyans can relate to is the difference Safaricom made to the capital markets in Kenya. Really increased participation, brought a whole new both segment and profile of investors, and then push the sophistication of the market forward significantly. MTN's listing is the equivalent of the Safaricom event for the Kenya capital markets. Why is it the equivalent? Number one, it will be the largest company on the Securities Exchange. Secondly, it has gone for a very wide and broad investor participation. Wim, as he mentioned, him and his team is spending time in every corner of Uganda, encouraging Ugandans to participate. The deal has been structured in a way that with 100,000 shillings, which is just under $30, you can actually participate. That's the minimum investment amount. And retail investors are very important to drive liquidity, to drive activity in the Securities Exchange. Institutional investors generally tend to take a much longer term view and consequently are not as active. Having said that, we do see institutions from time to time, especially international institutions, in the market buying and selling. And that's what for a Securities Exchange. You want for there to be activity because that activity reflects the value of the company. Lastly, and this is probably the most important factor that will drive liquidity going forward, is the fact that the USC and MTN have partnered to deliver a truly electronic solution. You can open up an SCD account, buy shares online, trading solution that will really empower investors and will enable brokers to bring the markets to individuals in a very seamless way. So, historically, relatively liquid, but we really believe that this is going to be a step change for the Uganda Securities Exchange. Back to you.
Thank you. I'll go back to Wim. Maybe Wim, you can tell us about your product portfolio roadmap going forward. And there's a question about adoption of 5G and also thinking about, is there a threat from guys like Elon Musk and SpaceX who are deploying the satellites for cheaper productivity, connectivity and internet access in the future? Maybe you can speak to us about the future from your point of view as CEO.
Okay, thanks for that. The future, we've spoken about it slightly. Of course, the growth we believe is mobile money and mobile data. So I'm not going to repeat all the story around the mobile money, the payments, the bank services. Now, on terms of mobile data, actually, it's too limited. It's not just mobile data, but also fixed data. What we have seen in the lockdown and the work from home is that now there is a real demand. People want fixed internet. They want fiber to the home. Okay. We have just started on that journey of bringing fiber to the home. We have like 3,000 homes connected. We have like 1,000 buildings for SME and offices. And over the last few, let's say it's 5 months, maybe since April, May, we have embarked on an ambitious plan now to really aggressively roll out fiber to the home. Again, I don't want to compare us too much, but Safaricom alone has like 250,000 fiber connections, residences, homes connected to fiber connectivity, which of course we all know if you have 3 kids at home, one is following the school, the other one is at Netflix, and you yourself wants to do a Teams call, that's not going to work anymore on one simple 4G router. The needs for fixed connectivity for fiber is really growing exponentially. And we are tapping into that because we have a very solid, robust existing fiber footprint. We're bringing fiber to our sites. And as and when we roll out fiber to our sites, you can also look at bringing fiber to the neighbors of the site and along the road. We are very well placed with our fiber footprint to bring fiber to thousands and thousands of residences in Kampala and in all the major cities, because we can leverage very easily on our existing fiber footprint. Then something also that we're just getting started is our wholesale business. You know, Uganda, it's landlocked, but at the same time, it's also a big transit country. We have Eastern DRC, South Sudan, Rwanda, even that are even further away from the sea. Again, with our very robust national fiber backbone, we also now starting to offering services into those neighboring countries. Of course, we still have to pass through Kenya to get access to the submarine cable, but that is also a new business line that we have just started to develop together with, like, for example, data center hosting. We are looking at partnerships to monetize that assets. We have an amazing asset of a data center, state of the art, fully redundant, you name it, but you're just using it for yourself. So those are some of these additional revenue streams that we are tapping in. And then probably even more important is the alignment with the group ambition from MTN Group around Ambition 25, and then particularly around platforms. We have launched our own, let's call it the African, we like calling it the African WhatsApp. It's called Ayoba. It's also available in Kenya. It's available across the world, where we have developed our own messaging platform, social media platform. It's really picking up. So we are also part of that. Of course, we don't own it's part of at the group level, but by promoting these kind of digital services, you also create the need for people to be connected. Having a smartphone is one thing. Being connected to the internet, okay, is fine. But the relevance, why would people want to connect to the internet? Why would I want to spend money on consuming data? What's the relevance? So that digital lifestyle and the promotion of the digital lifestyle, all the way from Kampala city, all the way to the most rural areas, what is the relevance? Why would people want to connect to the internet? If they have a smartphone and they have the network, then what? What are they going to do now? You have to create the demand. You have to create the digital lifestyle. Even deep down rural areas, there are opportunities, with enough innovation and creativity to find the right products and services that are relevant to those people that they also will be using now data services. And to promote all that innovation, we have taken a very deliberate move. We don't believe that inside, just in our own organization, we have all the wisdom and all the creativity and innovation. It's not true. When you've grown like we have grown, you need to open up your platform. So we have a very clear open API strategy. Any inventor, any new product that they want to launch, they can just plug in to the mobile money platform. It's an open API platform very easily. Everybody wants to develop digital services, but how do you monetize? You have a great product, you have a great service, wonderful. As an inventor, as an entrepreneur, and there are many, just like in Nairobi, we also have a lot of innovation hubs. There's so many young guys and ladies that develop wonderful things, but they all want the same thing. How do you monetize? And of course, plugging into the mobile money platform is the perfect way of monetization of your invention or your product or service that you are launching. So opening up the platform, open API, embracing anybody and everybody who comes with new ideas and new product services is a great way to leapfrog the whole innovation path. Doing it yourself, you will never manage to catch up. For us, we have our platform, we open it up, and we welcome any inventor with a new product or service to plug in and to be able to monetize using the mobile money platform. In a nutshell, that's how we see the future.
All right, thanks, Wim. I have a question for Paul. For the retail investor and for people who are intending to trade, what do the commission look like in Uganda? And are these likely to go down in future?
So Eric, just so I clarify, you're asking about secondary trading?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So for those that are not familiar with the capital markets and the Uganda Securities Exchange, there are no fees applicable to investors participating in the IPO. There will be no fees charged to receive your application. All costs carried and borne by the issuer, MTN. However, when the shares are listed, which currently is slotted for the 6th of December, and you either want to buy more shares or sell the shares that you got during the IPO, with engagement of your broker, you will be able to submit an order. And the statutory fees that go to a combination of brokers, the USE, the CMA, and these fees are really designed around sustainability of the industry and the sector. Those fees vary with the quantum of your trade. And there's a matrix that your brokers can provide, but it generally tends to be 1% and lower. Higher your trading quantum, the lower the percentage. The commissions are relatively aligned across the region. So if you are participating in the Kenyan markets, it won't be significantly different. And the question as to whether they'll go down going forward, I think volume is an important consideration. Remember, there are statutory fees. They are kind of embedded in law and part of the USE rules. But of course, with trading activity going up, complaint case to revise them. And the USE's primary objective is to maximize trading activity, and the brokers want volumes as well. I can't speak with certainty as to how things will evolve in the future, but it's not irrational should the volumes go up for costs to come down. One way of looking at it today is, the larger your investment, the larger your trade, the lower your fees. So invest large. Back to you, Eric.
At this point, just I want to ask Wim, maybe you can tell us a little bit about the split of the money business from the main businesses. What exactly is happening around that? And if investors are investing, are they investing only in the network business and not the money transfer business?
Okay. In September last year, government of Uganda, the parliament approved the NPS Act, National Payment System Act. Now, this act required us as MTN Uganda to do a structural separation of our mobile money business into a separate legal entity. Now, that legal entity, the MTN Mobile Money Company, is 100% owned by MTN Uganda Limited, the listed company. That means that if you get your in MTN Uganda, you automatically also get your same share in the mobile money business and the mobile money company. All the economic and business benefits from the mobile money activity will also flow through to the shareholders of MTN Uganda Limited. Okay. Why did we do that? Okay, for compliance reasons. The mobile money company has its own mobile money license issued by BOU. So we have also now direct oversight by Bank of Uganda on the mobile money activity, which adds an additional layer of compliance requirements and to a certain level also complexity. Dealing with a telco regulator is not the same dealing with the central bank. But again, I think that's more in the interest of minority shareholders to see that now the mobile money activity is directly supervised and regulated by Bank of Uganda. I think that it should give additional comfort to investors. And as I hinted to earlier, it opens up a possible migration or upgrade maybe one day from the current licenses that we're holding, maybe in, digital banking license or banking license that would allow us now to really get into digital banking products and services more independently without the mandatory partnership with the banks, which is still the case now. So yeah, I think that give enough flavor on your question.
Yes, I think so. And I think Eric has a question now for Dan Blair and SBG Securities. Eric?
Thanks, Eric. We have a question from one of the listeners. What is the minimum number of shares or amount one can invest for both the retail individual investor and for the institutional investors? And they're asking, is DMB and SPG the only brokers for Kenyans who already have accounts with them in Kenya? They need some sort of clarification on who they'll be dealing with if you want to participate in the IPO from Kenya.
Okay, thank you, Eric. On the question on who the client, if the client have an account, if they have a client as Dyer in Kenya, then they want to participate Uganda. So it will be the FCD shares, MTN Uganda shares, given them being issued Uganda. Then the FCD is held, let's say, in Uganda. However, we are assisting all our clients. We have an account here with us, like Kenya. Then we are assisting you in case of any operational process. So you won't be going directly to Uganda. That's the way the relationship we have with you here. We maintain the same relationship. In future, you want to take shares, you want queries on dividends and all that. Same thing relationship we have been having with you here. We maintain the same thing relationship. We are assisting all our clients to the application, even during the whole payment period, as we say. If we are done the application and have already an account in Kenya, then we also assist you in the processing of the sale. So on the second question, so Dyer and Blair and FDG are the only ones offering or giving our clients access to product Uganda. License, got the mandate and Kenya to give or to help our clients. They can come through.
Greg? Yes, maybe I can also jump in here. I'll start off with the first question regarding the process of a funding. As I'd explained earlier, for investors who would like to apply for the MTN shares, we have set out a process that is quite simple. You simply apply for the shares on the SCD and essentially let us know you've done that, and we'll facilitate the payment. We will not ask you to send money to Uganda if you're already an SBG Securities client. We will simply ask you to fund your account as you normally do in Kenya, and we have an operational mechanism for taking away the burden for you to start dealing with all the issues, especially particularly pertaining to the FX conversion and sending money through a cross-border money transfer. So that's one process. However, for people who would like to invest and they're not already SBG clients, or we would encourage them to become clients. However, if they would still wish to go through the full process of sending money across to Uganda, we will still assist in the process for doing that, because that's actually in the spirit of the IPO has already been set out in the prospectus and in the offer document. So that's the response to the question on how investors get to apply and pay for the shares. So on the capital markets, or rather the brokers involved in this, so and I'll explain why it's just SBG Securities and Dyer and Blair for now that have been approved by the CMA. So it's actually very important to mention that, as I said earlier, this is a precedent-setting moment, because we have actually been able to set out a framework for Kenyan investors to participate in a cross-border IPO through a framework that has actually been recognized by the Capital Markets Authority, and particularly so for their own protection. Because, for instance, SBG and Dyer and Blair already have affiliates across the border. We have gone through a process with the CMA to showcase our processes, the framework that we will follow, and demonstrate and provide perhaps some comfort that there has been an appreciation of the issues involved, particularly for Kenyans who would like to invest in a cross-border public offering. So that's really the context here. We would say this for those who are not clients of either SBG or Dyer and Blair, for that matter, they can get in touch with that. But if should that prove difficult, then they can do so through their current brokers, who will subsequently also figure out a way to engage us. But that's really, in a nutshell, why the process has been organized in such a manner.
Thank you, Greg. We'll move over to Wim. I have two questions. One is, ideally, when an investment in a company is also ideally an investment in the company's management, I'd like for you to give us a feel of your management, just an overview, and what values and characteristics you ideally look for in your top management. And a second question for you, this is from one of our listeners, is he'd like to know more about the MTN asset in terms of the masts and infrastructure, since he says that he's had most of them are not owned by MTN, but are sourced from third parties.
Okay, thanks for that. Let me start with the management team. The senior executives of MTN Uganda, we are about 15. Myself, CEO, and then CFO, marketing, sales, distribution, network. I mean, all the traditional functions that build up a telco company. We are 15, 12 Ugandans and 3 expatriates, including myself. The Ugandans have been mostly groomed internally. They've grown over the years, talent that has been groomed. There's also a lot of exposure being part of the MTN group, present in 20 different countries in Africa and the Middle East. Like today, we have 10 Ugandans, senior managers who are expatriates in other countries of the MTN footprint on the continent. So that gives you a lot of exposure, experience. That's really the advantage, being part of this big yellow MTN family, is that we do really nourish internal talent. It's very important for us. It's highly on our KPIs that we build up the talent from the inside. And with that exposure in other countries, it really gives people an opportunity to grow. Like, for example, our CFO was in West Africa, CFO in Liberia, Congo, Brazzaville, Ghana. Those are not necessarily easy countries. Liberia and Congo, Brazzaville is not so easy to work there. So when you come back in Uganda, you're really fully vaccinated. A lot of the problems that you might be, challenging in your home market. In terms of my view as a business leader, what I really appreciate in my team is candor. Be straightforward, tackle the problems, don't sit on them, but address them and fix them, and show leadership and groom your team. That's very much into the DNA of MTN, is the candor and talent building is very important for us, because that's the strength. The network is the network, the pricing, okay, fine. So those are certain things that can easily be copied, but the workforce and the strength of the workforce and the attitude, the winning attitude and the open mind, that is not something that can just be copy pasted easily. And so we carry it with a lot of pride that systematically we are the employer of choice in Uganda. Our staff likes working for us, and the love of the brand and the love of the company starts on the inside. If that is not there, if people, my own staff, they go home and they use an Airtel line to call or to browse the internet, there is a problem. And the love of the brand starts internally, and you can only have ambassadors that believe in what they do. And that's why we're so happy over the last 2 weeks. We have 10 of our senior executives who were trailing the country left, right, north, east, center with passion and with determination to make this IPO a success. On the second question, can you just refresh my memories?
It was about the MTN asset.
Oh, yeah. Yes. So very right. In Uganda, we have a tower co model, which means that we are not building the towers ourselves. It's ATC, American Tower Company, together with our local company that we've helped building up. It's called So there are 2 tower co companies now in Uganda. They own 99% of the towers. It applies for us the same way as it also applies for Airtel and for any other telco. Almost nobody actually owns their towers anymore. You can look at it and say, the asset is gone, the towers are gone. But at the same time, in terms of, for example, operational model, it is a very efficient model. Just think about it. There's one generator, there is one concrete block, there is one tower, and there are 2 or 3 tenants. The whole nature of infrastructure sharing allows for a very efficient operating model. You will, on the downside, you will rightfully say, yes, it's true, but you lose some competitive advantage, correct? I think there are players, which I will not name, that are very reluctant to give up, their competitive advantage in terms of the coverage that they have, and they want to hold on to their infrastructure. But in Uganda, we are quite open, liberal regulator. Even if we wouldn't want to, or we didn't have a tower company, we would still have to open up our infrastructure for infrastructure sharing. It's actually one of the cornerstones of the broadband policy is to share infrastructure. And the tower model is infrastructure sharing at its best. Because by the virtue of the company that is building the sites, without sharing, they don't make money because there's no second tenant. So it is almost like embedded in the operating model of a tower co that you encourage infrastructure sharing, which drives down the cost of doing business. And as I said, the competitive advantage that maybe was there 10 years ago when we were holding on to our infrastructure and say, we're going to block competition to also roll out in this village. Over time, that competitive advantage really, dilutes, and the regulator, as I said, wouldn't have allowed it anyway. Also, in terms of the cash flow, it's a very interesting model because when we put 15% of our revenue capex in the ground, that does not include these towers. Those are leases that we recognize in our accounting, but it's not part of what we consider as our capex. It allows us, like this year, we have rolled out 450 new sites. If we had to do it the old way, building the towers ourselves, I don't think we would have been able to do 450 sites, maybe 250 at most, but not 450. It comes with a lot of advantages from accounting, cash flow perspective, infrastructure sharing. For us, we see much more upside to a tower co model than the downside.
We have 15 more minutes maximum. I'll try to use it as much as we can. So I'll go quickly to Paul and ask them. There is a question that constantly keeps cropping up about valuation. I think some of the metrics that being shown is that MTN may start trading at around 6x EBITDA, and the metrics in Ghana are 3.4x. Can you maybe speak about why the premium valuation that comes with MTN? Maybe you can give us your thoughts around valuation, and also maybe talk to us about who's underwriting the IPO listing.
Thanks, Eric. As you can appreciate, I'm an insider as a transactional advisor, so my ability to talk extensively about valuation is limited. But what I can do is highlight the facts. If you look at the adjusted EBITDA, or rather the normalized EBITDA for MTN, the listing price or the listing multiple is 5 times EV to EBITDA, right? And for everybody out there, we tend to use the multiple enterprise value to EBITDA as an appropriate valuation metric for this particular sector because the generally accepted practice thought processes. This is the best way to capture both the value and the opportunity for a telco. So the listing EV to EBITDA multiple is actually 5 times, but that's before you consider the bonus shares. So for a retail investor in Uganda that uses their MIPO platform, essentially their phones to apply, they get 10 free shares for every 100. For an East African, and this will be very relevant for Kenyans who apply via Easy Portal, and our retail investors are entitled to 5 free shares. So that discount needs to be borne in mind in appreciating the valuation multiple. Of course, parties to engage to give good guidance on valuation and brokers able and capable of providing that advice at a one-on-one level with investors and guiding them through the thought process. But, the sense generally is that it's a fair price. It's not necessarily a premium valuation, especially when you consider comparables, similar companies, not just MTN Ghana, but a couple of other telcos in sub-Saharan Africa. Back to you, Eric.
About the underwriting, maybe did you speak about it?
This offer is not underwritten. A couple of reasons, but I'll probably highlight the most important one. The issuer's objectives were very clear. It's about broadening the shareholder base, right? It's not about raising capital. And sometimes the rationale for underwriting is to ensure that capital is raised because the capital either needs to be applied to a very specific growth opportunity and the company or is in need of formal recapitalization. But in this particular case, the objectives were different. The objectives were about broadening shareholder participation, focused on Ugandans and East Africans. And then consequently, there was no need for an underwriter. The issuer wanted to interface directly with investors. And given that ethos, the requirement for an underwriter was deemed unnecessary.
That's signifying a bit of confidence because usually an underwriter comes in maybe to kind of provide a backstop. We have 10 minutes. I want to give Dyer and Blair and SPG to give us the kind of their closing statements, and then I'll come back to finish off with Women Paul.
Yes, if I may go ahead, I'll just recap probably what are the critical and fundamental things to consider. We obviously want to encourage investors to actually study the IPO material. It's available online on the MTN website, and we will continue also to avail that to anyone else who is interested. It's important to highlight that this is a largely electronic paperless IPO, which is actually very commendable. I think our capital markets have come of age. We've also want to also continue to encourage investors to really consider this IPO, particularly in the context of diversifying their portfolios, particularly around the equities bucket, which, as you can understand, the issues around concentration risks. I think it's important for that to sort of come into play when investors are thinking about this, and of course, how to manage the cross-border investment process. And that's why we have come in to facilitate and ease in the process to make it more seamless for investors to do so. In case of any further queries, investors are free to get in touch with us. We'll continue to engage, and you'll probably see a lot of marketing material out there. But for SPG, they can obviously send us an email at sbgs@stanbic.com. They can call us as well. All those details will be available. I think even in the prospectus, our sister company in Uganda, the details are also quite available from that point of view. We'll be happy to assist any investor who feels they need our assistance, particularly to facilitate the process. I think that's it in closing. Thanks again for listening and for the discussions we've had this evening. Thanks.
Dan, Blair.
Thank you, Eric. It has been a very fruitful discussion, and that's important for the investors to understand more about the investment they are making. And that's why we have such a platform just for the investors to speak one-on-one with the CEO. So yes, it's quite a very easy process, the whole investment process. We are here to facilitate and guide you through the process. So in case you have any challenges, in case you need any assistance, reach out to us through our website at .com, email shares@dyerandbear.com. We'll guide you on the process. Ours is to help you be comfortable as you make your investment decision, just to be there, use there as your guide. And we believe, as we have done so in so many occasions, even in Uganda itself, the Stanbic, whom we are working together on these ones, we are the ones who help them least in Uganda. So we are just there to help you and make it as easy for you as possible. So thank you very much. I think I didn't give a brief of myself. A private wealth manager at an investment bank. Thank you very much, everyone, for attending.
Thank you, Wilson and Robert. Also, thank you, Grant. We hope to have you around also maybe in the next few weeks to explain a bit more about the process, and maybe for those who missed out on today's event. Bob, maybe you can give us your closing words about the IPO, your experience through the process, and maybe also tell the young people out there and want to aspire to be in a profession like yours. What kind of advice would you give to them so that they can also reach where you are? At the same time, maybe you can tell us general advice about the IPO, and maybe your closing words also before I come finally to Wim.
Thank you, Eric. First of all, there's a correction I need to make about a submission I made earlier. My friend and my colleague from Dyer and Blair, Uganda, Esther, just sent me an update on commissions charged for secondary trading. Actually, they range between 2.1 and 1.1%. I think the 1% really applies to quite large trades of about 6.2 million Kenya shillings. So that's really the visibility I wanted to provide. Thank you, Esther. About the IPO, we obviously apply our minds as transaction advisors to the type of transactions that we want to participate in, because our brand is closely associated with the transaction. And when this opportunity came up, we were very eager because we understand the profile of the company, we understand the growth prospects, and most importantly, we know what this listing is going to do for the capital markets in Uganda. It is a step change. It is a significant move in the right direction. There are a couple of ducks that are well aligned. I think the government of Uganda is well positioned and encouraging companies to list. I think the market generally, retail investors in Uganda are becoming a lot more sophisticated, and consequently, we expect that the markets will become significantly more liquid, following in tandem with CAPE. And lastly, it's a fantastic company all other ways. It's corporate governance, the transparency, the strength of the brand, and the quality of products that it issues. So I think a great opportunity for East Africans to participate. There's good value in there, bonus shares. I think we can say unequivocally, it's something that should be contemplated quite seriously. The question on guiding young people how to participate in this profession, first of all, the capital markets are an excellent place, great training, excellent brokers that have a long history in the markets and have developed a lot of talent that eventually do find themselves in investment. I think if you're interested in a career in this sector, stay close to the players, keep an open mind, and don't limit yourself to finance. The sector actually appreciates people with this varied backgrounds, engineers, doctors, etc. Yeah, maybe just a parting comment. This offer is open until the 22nd of November. All applications that are received before then will be considered. The allocation policy will be implemented and on a very strict and rigorous basis. So please make sure that if you're intending on participating, you engage your brokers, you complete your application, and you submit the payment before then. Thank you very much. Back to you, Eric.
All right. For the other speakers, there are also questions being posted at our pinned tweet. We've also tagged you so you can try and answer them. I think there's a question there about, in case of oversubscription, what would happen, and especially because of the exchange rates and all. So finally, to him, when going through the holdings of the company, I noticed it's only the chairperson who has shares in the company, as you said, 4%. Is there an intention from maybe you or your team to also have some skin in the game in terms of buying shares, maybe in the open market for yourselves? And secondly, the journey for MTN bit reminds me about Safaricom back in 2008 in terms of mobilization, trying to get in retail investors, and that's what you're doing. But also the journey also reminds me like Safaricom has become like a big player, even in the capital markets. It's around 60-70% of market cap, and that's what you're going to be now. With that also comes a lot of responsibility. Maybe you can speak to us about your thinking around being a big player, if you're also going to maybe mobilize for some of the commissions to go down, or maybe just help also drive capital markets going forward. You can answer that and maybe give us your closing remarks and maybe make a powerful invitation for retail investors in Kenya to come join you in the journey to become an even bigger player in the markets in Uganda.
Okay, thanks, Eric. That's a lot of things to address, but let me first start by saying we're putting in a lot of skin in the game, as you call it, the entire management team, including myself. We are buying. There is a special also employee offer, and there is a 10% cashback that the company is offering to all its employees for participating. I am putting a number of good savings in applying and paying for shares. I'm using also my phone. I also want to get that extra bonus. My CFO is fully committed every day in applying. The top management of the company is very committed, believe in their story. We believe in our story of growth. So yeah, we are active applicants for, also getting our share of that offer. You maybe touched also a little bit on governance. Of course, we know that our current board composition is not yet compliant with the regulations of CMA in terms of independent directors to really protect the interest of the minority shareholders. We're going to get a few months before, by probably within the next 6 months, we will make sure that the board is also reflective of being a listed company and what it means, especially when it comes to the independence of the directors and also the composition. Very important. Gender is a very important topic. We also have to make sure both at the executive senior leadership level and at the board level, that is also also taken into account and gives the right diversity, which again makes companies stronger if you take that into account. I don't want to overdwell the comparison, but yeah, I mean, somehow we want to use the Safaricom story as some kind of a reference point. It is dangerous, to want to compare yourself with such a company. I said in the beginning, their size is probably 5-6 times of what we are. It would be a bit unfair to just compare apple to apple, but within the Uganda markets, when it comes to the stock exchange, within the telecom markets, within the transformational transaction. I think that's really the key word, that it's a transformational transaction. We believe for the Uganda Security Exchange, for the Uganda capital markets, the listing of MTN, we believe that we can get 50, 60, 100,000 Ugandan shareholders on board, where currently the biggest, broadest shareholder base, I think, is Stanbic with maybe 12,000 or so unique shareholders. If you can go from 12,000 to maybe 100,000 or 60, 70,000, once again, that would show an amazing transformation of the capital markets. We believe that there will be a before MTN IPO and there will be an after. Just like with Safaricom, they transformed the capital markets in Kenya, and it was never the same again after they embarked on their IPO. So we believe that we have the same potential, maybe at a smaller scale for sure, in a different jurisdiction, yes. But we are neighbors. There are very high level of similarities between our two markets. So we do believe that we have that potential to democratize and revolutionize the capital markets in Uganda. And on that note, allow me to, really say a word of thank you for allowing us on this platform. Very engaging, very interesting questions, a very lively debate. I really thank you, Eric, for allowing us to share our views and to tell our story of the growth of MTN. And I would be very happy to welcome thousands of Kenyan investors, because we are one East African spirit. I think it would also be good for everybody that we can show that we are one and we think as East Africans. And that's why we also enlarged the bonus shares to East African citizens. We felt that just limiting it to Ugandan citizens would maybe be badly perceived in the spirit of the integration that I think we all believe is a good thing. So that's another tick of the box where we really wanted to show that we want to be inclusive and we want to change the game when it comes to capital market and participation of Ugandan, but also East African retail. So on that note, I would say I'm welcoming all of you, hopefully one day on the AGM, and looking forward to be your servant, because that's what we become. You'll become our boss, and then you'll hold us accountable for the performance of the company going forward. So thank you so much, and have a great evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Wim. Thank you, Paul. And thank you for Dyer, Blair, and also SBG Securities for joining us today. It's always a pleasure. Thank you, co-host Eric, also for being part of the journey. We have done a long thread that also highlights some of the key things that we picked from the IPO. Our prospectus, you can see it on our pinned tweet. You can just read through it. It's a really good summary of the content. In the end, we'll also include how you can maybe links to Dyer and Blair in Kenya and also SBG Securities who are majorly involved. We will transform this Twitter space into a podcast, and then it should be available by maybe mid to end next week. You can listen to it. If you have questions, just ask, and then we'll tag the relevant people in the various companies, and then they can respond to them. This is a good opportunity to also say, this is one of the first IPOs that we've seen in East Africa in a while, so it's good to participate. The capital markets are a really good opportunity to actually do wealth creation and also to support the local markets. It's part of our mission to definitely make sure that we democratize information and make it easier for retail investors to access information on capital markets. So we hope in future we will come with this team to share with us once they have the Q4 results out. I will be glad to host and to listen to what they have to say. So on that note, we end for today. Thank you for joining us. Goodbye, Sebo.